Lead SA. The Consumer Focus on Talk Radio 702 and 567 Cape Talk with Reedy Clubby.
Hello, Kim.
How are you?
You look divine. Where are you going after this?
Lunch with you.
You just dressed up for lunch with me?
I did it all for you.
You should have told me.
Yeah, well, I want to surprise you.
Today we're talking about?
We're talking about something completely different. It's holiday time, something fun and interesting. And I don't know, Reedy, and all the time, we've never actually done this. And it's quite a nice one to do. Traveling in our own continent, on our own continent.
Beautiful, because it's quite different, isn't it?
It's so different, and it's become really popular over the last several years. We have such a diverse and exotic continent, and the opportunity to see sights that you can't see anywhere else in the world. There are so many options for adventurous travelers. Now, it is the holiday season. You probably have made your plans, but if you haven't, listen carefully, because we're going to tell you about some really nice possibilities within our own continent and give you some pretty good travel tips. Now, there are a couple of questions I'm sure, Reedy, that spring to mind when you talk about traveling in Africa. And I think safety and healthcare or medical advice is at the top of the list. Now, in terms of where we are in Africa, the most commonly visited countries include Swaziland, Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mozambique, Madagascar, Malawi, Tanzania, Kenya, and Ethiopia. And all of these destinations are quite safe to visit. Mm-hmm. You need to be vigilant, as you would anywhere in a big city in the world. So you shouldn't go carrying valuables in plain sight. You should keep your camera sort of on you and well concealed if you're not using it. And you shouldn't go walking about alone at night. But I think that's pretty much the case in Paris, London, and New York as well. Mm-hmm. Travelers with tour operators or groups are probably at the least risk, and self-drive clients or travelers are advised to plan well in advance what routes they wish to travel and get all their destination information ahead of time, and also leave their itinerary with somebody, in case something happens or something goes wrong. And I'm not talking about personal safety, a tire goes flat in the middle of nowhere, or if they don't have a cell phone signal, that sort of thing. There are a lot of places in Africa that are in the bush, so to speak. So you have to be well prepared.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I don't know if this is being well prepared, Kim, and I'm going through your research. I don't know if this comes from you or someone else, but it says in Uganda, there are amazing gorillas. Something I'm just dying to do. Kim?
The Consumer Focus on Talk Radio 702 and 567 Cape Talk with Reedy Clubby.
And let's welcome Garth Jenman, owner and MD of Jenman Safaris in our Cape Talk studios. Good morning to you. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Reedy, and hi, listeners.
Hi, it's lovely to have you. Well, okay, let's start first talking about Jenman Safaris, what services you provide, and before we get into the discussion today, who is Jenman Safari?
Reedy, we are a small group adventure safari operator. We're based down in Cape Town, which probably isn't the best place to be based in if you're a safari operator. We operate throughout Southern Africa and East Africa, including Madagascar. A lot of our work is small mobile groups through Botswana and Namibia, in Tanzania as well. And in Madagascar, we do a lot of outbound from South Africa. We do have a lot of international clientele that fly in to come around South Africa, and the rest of Southern Africa and East Africa as well.
Okay, so today's topic is specifically about traveling on the continent. Would you say there's anything different about traveling in Africa as opposed to any other part of the world?
Well, what's quite funny is I often have friends who will ask me, and you can see they're quite nervous about what they call Africa, which of course is the rest of Africa, not South Africa. And they ask me about safety and what about your client's safety and what about the safety of your vehicles and your guides and that. And it's really, it's unfortunate, I suppose. I don't think there's been a lot of positive press on Africa, even in South Africa. I understand it from our international clients. Often they're seeing the negative aspects of Africa on the news. And I think South Africa and South Africans often see that as well. So there's a fear of traveling in the rest of Africa. And, really, as you mentioned earlier on, yes, there's issues in a big city like Harare, but you're going to have those same issues in any big city in the world that one needs to be careful of.
And, I'm sitting here thinking, geez, are there still fears still in 2011? And I don't know, that's my personal experience, and it's not necessarily the gospel truth, but I felt safer traveling in other parts of African cities than I would in Johannesburg. That's just how I felt. I mean, apart from the countries that had experienced political instability, where there's a civil war and so on, just your random crime, of course it occurs. Of course it happens. But I personally, whether I'm walking in Nairobi or Lusaka, Zambia, I just felt safer there than I would going for a run in Sandton at around 6 o'clock. But that's just me.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to bring that up. But,
no, I'm bringing it up.
Yeah. Our vehicles are safer in the rest of Africa, and our bigger worry is when we bring them back down to South Africa, you know.
Yeah.
So, you're spot on with that. I mean, I've just come back 2 weeks ago. I went around Zimbabwe. I didn't feel threatened. I didn't feel it was unsafe in any place, you know. Sure, you come across some roadblocks with the police and that, but they're all joking and laughing and friendly with us. So.
Garth, tell me, in terms of of health, and obviously there's malaria. I know it's mandatory in some of the countries to have a yellow fever injection before you go. But what happens if you are somewhere and either with one of your tours or even alone? How easy is it to have access to medical care?
I think it's very important. You know, we stress it with all our clients. It's mandatory that they have medical insurance, health insurance, and evac insurance, because you know the medical facilities, they're not great in the rest of Africa. You know, and there's some horror stories where people really. Someone told me the other day that his wife actually fell into a coma going to Madagascar, and had to be flown back out. And I think it cost him close to 2 million rand. He didn't have insurance. He had to hire a Learjet to get it back out to Johannesburg. You know, so one needs to be careful. Of course, you're going on holiday. You don't want to think about the worst case scenario. But it can happen, you know, so you do need to cover yourself. There are doctors. There's always, you know, within a couple of hours drive, we can always get our clients to a doctor. But when you need a better care, the best place is to get them, most of the time, is to get them back to South Africa, and to fly them out as quickly as possible.
So basically, travel insurance is a must. If you've got any chronic meds, taking supplies is a must, and possibly, you know, generic antibiotic, that sort of thing.
Yes, definitely. We always suggest that with our clients.
Okay. Let's talk about what to do. I'm sure there's no easy way to answer this, but when you think African travel, a lot of people think about safaris, but there must be so much more than just a safari, although I know that you would have a vested interest in that. But talk to me about our options when we're traveling to different parts of the African continent. We can divide the continent into the southern part, the East Africa part, whichever one you choose, but what's there to do?
Well, I think it really depends on what you're looking at doing. You know, if you know, a lot of people say they're going on honeymoon, you know, very popular, you know, they fly to Zanzibar or off to Mauritius, one of the islands of, you know, in the Indian Ocean. You know, whether you're traveling with your family, that also that's also going to affect where, one should travel and where, one shouldn't travel. And then, if you really want to go on a sightseeing safari experience, or do you just want to relax, you know? So people are flying up to Victoria Falls, and maybe you just want to relax in a hotel for 3-4 nights. Then you can of course go through to Chobe, which isn't too far away, and do the same thing there, and then fly back to South Africa. Or do you really want to go on a you know, like an ultimate safari experience? Like, to me, Tanzania and the Northern Circuit is what, if you really want to see a high concentration of wildlife and game, that's where one should look at going.
Yeah, I'd love, yeah, and also the Serengeti and the Masai Mara and that sort of thing.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and then a lot for South Africans is South Africans love their water sports and going out to the islands like Madagascar. We get a lot of South Africans going there because they just want to relax on the beach and like do an island hopping trip, for instance.
I'm not sure that this topic was a good idea at this point when we're all feeling so exhausted.
Oh, no.
All right.
Tempting.
Give us a call on 021-446-0567 011-883-0702. Alan in Benoni, hi.
Hi, good morning, Rudy.
Good morning.
I would encourage anybody to go up and down Africa. My wife and I were on the road. We came to Cairo and back. We were on the road for a year, a week short of a year. And we actually got robbed once. That was in Nelspruit. Everywhere else, we never felt so safe. We were in all the local markets. We always bought local produce, and we never felt safer. And we actually trekked the gorillas as well in Uganda.
Wow.
Which was, you've got to put on your bucket list. And
thank you. Reedy's teasing me because I wrote, I want to do the gorillas. I mean, I want to see them.
Yeah, I know exactly what you meant. They're very big to do, I think.
Thank you. Ellen. Thanks for the call. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Bye. And Garth, I'm just thinking about New York and Paris and other parts of Europe. For me, the best time to go is August, in August to September. But the best time to travel if you are in Africa, I mean, it can get very, very hot in some countries.
Yes, well, it depends on the different areas. In Southern Africa, generally speaking, Southern Africa and including Madagascar, December month starts getting really hot. Mm-hmm. Even November sometimes as well. And then January, February, March, you've got your rainy season. So you want to keep away from it during that time. And then, season is sort of from May through to October. And I always like to do the shoulder season, like even April's quite nice because there's not too many people around and the weather's still quite nice during that time. But then up in East Africa, it has slightly different. It has 2 rainy seasons. So like January, February, March is a good time to go there. And then, April, May, June, they get the rain. So season sort of starts in June again and runs through June, July, August, September, October. And then November, December, you have a rainy season again. So you've obviously got to pick it during that time period.
Now, I saw on your website, Garth, that you mentioned, because of mosquitoes, et cetera, it's a good idea to bring, long sleeved shirts or long pants sort of thing. What other essentials? The weather can be so hot, but you do have to be aware of, mozzies, and I have to say, I would wear thigh-high boots because of the snakes, but what do you need to pack in terms of what you're going to wear?
Well, it's always best to pack light. Generally speaking, you're going to go when it's quite hot, but saying that in the evenings it can cool down, so you do need warmer clothes during that time period. Your mosquitoes are biting in the early mornings and evenings, and that's a good time to wear long slacks and long sleeve shirts.
Yes.
Your best preventative measure with malaria, of course, is to make sure you don't get bitten. And there's certain areas where malaria is quite high, and other areas which are malaria areas, but you don't have such a big exposure to malaria. Like Botswana, for instance. Touching wood now, but in the 19 years we've been operating, not one of our guides has ever got malaria, in Botswana, even though it is a malaria area. Okay. So you do need to be careful in your higher concentration of people, like Victoria Falls, where there's a lot of people coming together in your towns. That's where there's a higher chance of, contracting malaria.
Mm-hmm. I think also, what I was going to mention earlier, with the malaria is I know that can make you feel sick, but it's really important to take the prophylactics before you travel. But then in terms of not getting bitten, use the sprays and use the soaps and use the candles and whatever you can, because ultimately you just don't want to get bitten.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah,
okay, totally. We'll carry on with this conversation in just a moment. Give us a call on 021-446-0567. 011-883-0702. We're talking about traveling to countries on the continent, the rest of Africa. I don't want to call it traveling in Africa because we're here in Africa, but traveling to other parts of the African continent, what your options are, what packages you must choose, what you need to know, the do's and don'ts. And I just think that apart from you asking questions in this conversation, it would be nice for you to call us and share your stories. Let's go down memory lane. The best trip that you went to with your family, the best safari that you went on, that you experienced, and where was it, when? We'd love to hear from you. And even the disastrous stories, we'd love to hear, because therein lie all the lessons that the rest of us can learn. Give us a call.
The Consumer Focus on Talk Radio 702 and 567 Cape Talk with Reedy Clubby.
Garth Jenman is our guest. He's the owner and MD of Jenman Safaris in our Cape Talk studios. And of course, we've got our Consumer Forum editor, Kim Novick. We're taking your calls on 021-446-0567, 011-883-0702. Karima in Grassley Park. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. I'm calling about Mali and Madagascar. I very desperately want to go to experience the annual Festival of the Desert in just north of Timbuktu, as well as go to some of the historical places in Timbuktu. I've approached some agencies in South Africa, but they all kind of freeze up when I just mention Mali. No one really ventures out there. And so I'm keen to arrange it myself. I just want to know how safe it is to go there, considering the recent activities in Mauritania and in Mali, the hijacking from that. And also, I'm trying to find some affordable flights. There's options to go via Senegal, via Kenya, via, I think, Gabon, but maybe even cheaper to go up to London and back down. I just kind of not familiar with the airlines that operate that in West Africa and North Africa.
Yeah.
If someone could give me some directions there. And then just on Madagascar, I've been to some sort of less traveled places in the north of Madagascar, and I can really say I've had a fantastic experience.
That's great.
At a very kind of budget price with sort of fully, 4x4 driver, chef, everything for a really kind of reasonable price. And I've been to 2 national parks up north there, which our local kind of travel agencies don't really send people up there. So it's very safe and fantastic people, very friendly, and yeah, it's very safe.
Lovely, lovely. A lot of issues that Karima raised there. I mean, on the last part about flights, I experienced that when I was trying to prepare for a trip to Ghana, that you'd have to travel first to Europe before you go to that country. That just doesn't make sense. And the follow-up question would be why are flights in Africa are disproportionately high? But there's a whole lot that she raised there. Do you want to speak to that, Garth?
Karima, unfortunately with Mali, I'm going to have to give you the blank. We actually don't know, but we don't do a lot on West Africa. I found, we operate in 14 different countries and we found to rather stick to what our specialities are. I know, unfortunately, West Africa, there's not a lot of flight connectivity, with Southern Africa, connecting up with West Africa. One thing I've learned is that the airlines, most of the time, they survive on business travelers. And if you don't have that business connection with a country, then you don't have the flight connectivity. And then, of course, it pushes up the flight prices a lot. And, I know like SA Airlink that flies to Madagascar, I think it's 70-80% of their clientele are business travelers flying to Madagascar. So the top up is really, the holiday makers. And that's how they managed to keep the flight price down for the holiday makers.
I think, wasn't someone kidnapped in Timbuktu last week?
Yes, unfortunately, and someone was killed as well.
That instills a lot of fear in people. What tips would you have for someone there? Because I'm just thinking, is the best thing to go with tour operators and have groups and tour guides, which I must be honest, I'm not always in the mood for. I like a bit of autonomy and independence. Or is it better to just self-drive? As it were. What would you advise, Garth?
Really, I think it really depends on how much time you've got. Even for myself as a safari operator, I prefer to travel on my own. But sometimes, if I'm going to a new destination, I will use a local tour operator to go around when I'm pushed for time and I've only got a week, I've only got 10 days. Sure, if you've got enough time to take, like the earlier caller mentioned, he traveled through Africa for a year. Along the way, you're chatting to people about your next destination. You're finding out about the safety issues and whatnot, and you've got enough time to find out what's on the ground going forward. But when you're pushed for time, you're busy, and as most of us are in our work lives, and we've only got X amount of time off every year. A lot of the time, you are forced to go with an operator who's got that specialist knowledge, who knows exactly what's going on, who knows if there's a problem in a certain area. They're not going to run tours there. They don't want to put their clients in any form of danger.
It's true, and it does actually save time because instead of sort of exploring and thinking, well, that was a dud place to visit or something like that, they know exactly what to do.
Yeah, no, definitely.
But Garth, are there some areas that we can boldly say are general no-nos? Because it's all very well to be pro-Africa and encouraging trade and travel, tourism, inter-Africa tourism. But the fact of the matter is that there could be some areas or regions that are just a no-no. Would you, if I were a client and I want to visit a particular country, would you share that information with me, even if it's negative,
Oh, totally. It's not in our interest to run any tours or to send any clients into areas where there are any potential problems, and we members of different associations, and that feed us information on the ground of what's happening in different parts of Africa. So most of the time we're actually getting the news coming through to us before it's broadcasted out on the news about what's happening in the different parts, But, I can safely say in all the areas that we're operating in, it's all safe. I mean, I remember when, in Madagascar, every 4 or 5 years, unfortunately, they've had a coup.
Yeah.
Then of course, on TV, you're seeing the riots and whatnot happening. And I remember the last time it happened a few years ago, and, they announced that there was a curfew in Antananarivo. And I phoned a friend who was there, and I said to him, how's it going? How are you doing? I hear there's a curfew. He said, God, what are you talking about? I'm sitting in a restaurant and everything's quiet and fine, So it's quite hard to work out exactly what's happening. And of course, the press is going to portray the latest news and what's happening at the time.
And also go to a certain area and present that as a picture for the entire country, which is sometimes not true.
Not true, totally. I mean, it's the same. We operate tours into the southwest of Angola. Now, as soon as you mention Angola, people imagine war. 27 years of war, 30 years of war. What's going on there? Isn't it dangerous? Aren't there landmines? And actually, it's as safe as anything. It's quite unbelievable when you go there.
Which is why I always say to people, even listeners to the station, don't just use the media as your source of information. Don't do that. We are just a part of a continuum. There are different sources of information, and test it for yourself and then make a decision. You take responsibility for the information that you get. Okay. So Garth, the costs, somehow I think psychologically you expect to pay more for a trip to Europe or the United States, but because you're traveling in Africa, you're expecting it to be cheap, but it's anything but cheap.
Yeah. I think, what people don't understand is, for someone to put a luxury lodge in the middle of nowhere is the logistics that go behind that and the cost that it goes to run an operation like that. So I think the expectations are because, people in Africa are poor, that means everything must be cheap in Africa. Well, not necessarily. Actually, it can even be more expensive sometimes. I mean, when they're having to bring supplies in from another neighboring country or even from Europe, and then, of course, your connectivity. There's less people traveling around in Africa, flying around in Africa than there would be flying around in Europe on any day of the week. So obviously, with less connectivity, the flight prices aren't necessarily going to be that cheap. What's great recently is what we've seen is the opening up of the skies between Southern Africa and East Africa, which has really brought the flight prices down. And that makes a big difference. Even it's the same with Madagascar as well. Madagascar, once you're there on the ground, like the earlier caller, she mentioned she had been there. It's actually very reasonable once you're there. You've just got to make sure that you can get there. Your flight price is reasonable to get you to Madagascar.
Okay, let's take a break. We'll be back with more.
The Consumer Focus on Talk Radio 702 and 567 Cape Talk with Reedy Clubby.
You had a question there for Garth, but let's just go to Togo first and then we'll carry on in a moment. Togo in Constantia Kloof. Good morning.
Hi, Reedy. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Fine, thanks. I just got 2 questions. I want to ask you, panel, which is the best time to go to Bazaruch Island in Mozambique? And also, we're going to have Christmas for 7 nights in Serenity in Mpumalanga, and I hear there's mosquitoes. I just want to know, is it a mosquito area? Thank you.
Okay. I think the mosquitoes will be there, but the best time to visit Maputo, what would you say, Garth?
Once again, in the summer months, it does start getting hot. But of course, that's the South African holidays. So like December through to January is still okay. Then later January, February, that's when you're getting your rains again. So I wouldn't go.
The rains bring the mosquitoes.
Yeah, and the rains do bring the mosquitoes, absolutely. Yeah. But she mentioned Mpumalanga at that time of the year. I mean, that's close to Maputo, so you would have the same situation.
Yes, for sure. Definitely.
Okay. Togo, just go and enjoy. So many people have done it before. That's the time to go. Go and have the prawns and have fun and watch out for those Mozambican girls. They're beautiful. And SMS says, is Egypt off limits right now?
Yes, I would think so. We actually do a backup for a bicycle tour, starting in Egypt. They're starting in January and they do 120 days all the way down to Cape Town. And, we've had massive cancellations because of the problems in Egypt.
I've got friends going to Egypt this week. They're going. In fact, they didn't say a word. I'd be curious to see how it goes. But yeah, they're off I think, yes, for about a week to Egypt.
Yeah. And again, it is, I'm not saying it's great, but I mean, that's another perfect example of what we're talking about, that it's a political, it's political instability, civil unrest, as opposed to it being an unsafe country generally.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Garth?
Yeah. Yes, totally. I mean, you know what? I mean, a perfect example for me is Zimbabwe. And I actually started Jenman Safaris in Zim in the early 90s. And the way Zimbabwe's been painted because of the political problems over the last 11 years, you would imagine everything's fallen apart. And just going through the countryside the other day, most things are functional up there. You know, the kids are still in school uniforms. They're still going to school. You know, the roads are in good condition. You can find fuel everywhere. The supermarket shelves look like South African supermarket shelves. But most people who haven't been there would never guess that by what the press has portrayed in Zim, you know. And sometimes I think it's unfair. I don't want to bash the press here, but I just look at Zimbabwe and, you know, everyone has jumped on the bandwagon against the leader up there. And it's sort of like, no, everyone's too scared to be the first person to come through with any positive news about Zimbabwe. Because there's a lot of positive news. Yes, there's still problems up there. I'm not saying there aren't, but there's a lot of positive information that should be coming out on Zimbabwe.
And I think in a lot of the tourist areas, I know I went to Vic Falls a couple of years ago and I absolutely loved it. But the people who work around the tourist areas, that they make their bread and butter by being, you know, in terms of the customer service they offer. So, I mean, the people were incredibly friendly up there. And you didn't feel threatened or
I suppose they'd go the extra mile because they're going through such a difficult, dry period, as it were. Caroline in Northcliffe, hi.
Hi, Rudy.
Yes.
I've just got back from Egypt. I was there for 10 days. And it was wonderful.
When was this? When did you return?
Last Wednesday.
Wow. And in terms of safety and stuff?
No problems at all. We even went to the square where all the trouble was.
And there was no trouble.
And it's perfectly safe.
You missed the trouble, Caroline. What did you love most about being in Egypt? Tell me.
The snorkeling and diving.
Oh, really?
Fantastic.
Wow. Was it a beautiful experience? Sounds
Absolutely
like it.
Wonderful.
And the
yes.
food, Caroline?
Lovely. I want to go back next year.
Wow.
I've always wanted to go.
Okay,
Sounds
lovely. Thank you very much, Caroline.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Caroline in Northcliffe.
Garth, also, just a question. You were talking about Zimbabwe and, you know, there's sort of all the jokes that if you need to buy a loaf of bread, you need to take a wheelbarrow full of money. The money you carry around in Africa, do we need dollars, euros, pounds? What do we take?
It depends where you are in Africa. I mean, Zimbabwe, of course, they got rid of the Zim dollar, so now they're on the US dollar, and they take the rand as well. But it's mainly still rand based. Madagascar is euro based, but the rest of is US dollar based. And Madagascar is euro.
Yeah. Well, I have a story about traveling to Mozambique, and the police officers there, apparently they're hectic on the road. They stop you for every little thing if you're driving there. And apparently they do ask for bribes quite a lot, or they threaten you with jail. And they don't want to be paid in the Mozambican currency. They want South African rands, apparently. And you know, you need to be prepared and to know that there's nothing as horrible as, you know, being in a foreign country where you don't quite understand what the rules are and you're not streetwise and being ambushed in that manner. Apparently it happens quite a lot. Okay. And I have an SMS here. Please ask your guest, what about travel insurance? Okay. What about car insurance over borders? Garth, do you have any advice there?
Car insurance, it's pretty standard. You just got to get hold of your, whatever company you've got insurance with, and to make sure that you are covered, but you will be covered for the Southern African countries. And normally, like for pushing up into East Africa, you would just need to get an extension on that to make sure that you are covered for those areas. And then another big thing as well is you need a letter from your bank if the car is financed, giving you permission to take the vehicle outside of the country. Otherwise, you won't be allowed to take it out.
Some SMSs. Hi, Rudy. We spent a wonderful holiday in Zim this year and felt much safer than in South Africa, and the people are wonderful. That is from Louise. Prue wants to know, please give some information on the Luangwa Valley in Zambia. Know anything about that, Garth?
I don't know too much about Zambia. I mean, we push our clients more towards Zimbabwe, but Luangwa and South Luangwa, there's quite a few different lodges there. And what's also nice to see is there's quite a few mid-range lodges coming through. It was quite pricey. up until a few years ago, but now you've got a lot of mid-range options to get there. To actually, to get there from South Africa to drive, it's quite a long trek, but you can fly into, Lusaka, and then you can either get a transfer from there, which is also a full day through to South Luangwa, or you can get a light aircraft transfer.
Okay. And my producer was actually telling me about some lodges and areas having rules around children. Is it true you can't just take kids everywhere?
Yes, you need to be careful. People will notice, I remember taking my young son to the ostrich farm in Oudtshoorn, and they've got some lions there. And the lions and there's a walkway over the top of the lion enclosure, and these lions just see a child and they're just jumping up in the air going for the child. So one needs to be careful. The lions will go for, they see a child as a weaker candidate.
Mm-hmm.
So you do need to be careful. And, a lot of camps, the beauty of a lot of camps is that they're open, that they're not fenced off. And so a lot of camps they have certain restrictions, no kids under 9, no kids under 12. We've got our own camp in Botswana, and we don't take any kids under 12 years old there because it is open to the wild.
Okay, so it's very important for families to make sure of the rules. You don't want to be disappointed once you get there. Well, we have to leave it there now. Garth, thank you so much for a lovely conversation. We've loved having you here. Thanks indeed.
Oh, pleasure.
Thank you, Garth Jenman, owner and MD of Jenman Safaris.